Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Social.
Welcome to the Untitled Socially Distant virtual online super distant podcast. I'm Dominik. Hello, everyone. And that's
I'm Dominik.
That's Dominik as well.
Welcome to the Dominik podcast, this Untitled Socially Distant Dominik podcast.
The Domcast. That could be a thing. That could be a thing. I'd pay to watch that.
That would belong on a different website.
So I'm Dominik. I'm from Slovakia, and that's.
I'm the other way.
You're the other way. Okay, and that's.
I'm Christos I'm in New Jersey right now.
So we're quite literally 4,000 miles apart, so quite socially distant. Mm-hmm. And on this podcast, we talk about movies and such. So on today's topic, we will be talking about society that we all live in. It's crazy. It's wild.
We do live in a society.
We live in a society. And that's not just a meme. We literally live in a society.
And also, don't worry, we won't be talking about Joker yet.
Unless. But no, we're actually not talking about Joker.
Yeah.
The first podcast to talk about society and not talk about Joker. We're good with the firsts. The first podcast not to spoil Fight Club. Hey, there's one. No tea, no shade, just facts.
No.
So, on the topic of society, so first we'll be talking about two movies that me and Christos. Wait, did you actually say your name or did you just say you were Dominik?
I said my name.
Okay, well then
All-brained, socially distant, untitled podcast looking.
So me and Christos have selected movies on the topic of society, and we'll talk about them and why they're important in the perspective of society, and then discuss a prompt we'll introduce later. So how about you start us off, Christos?
Okay. Hold on, let me bring up the images. So the movies that I will be talking to you about are some movies by famed director Bong Joon-ho. He's always been pretty big with his 2012, I want to say, movie Snowpiercer being very successful in the US as well. But recently he started gaining a lot of fame with the movie, it's not updating here yet, Parasite, which won the Best Film of the Year award at the Oscars, being the first foreign film to do so. What Bong Joon-ho does is that he discusses themes of society on a very micro level. Well, I should say in Parasite, in a very micro level that gets related to a macro level. Although the movie takes place in Korea, it has a lot of implications for how societies has worked really everywhere across the world. And he's very clear with his symbolism too. So in don't worry, I won't spoil anything, but with Snowpiercer, it's about a train. The back of the train represents the lower part of society, while the front of the train represents the higher part of society. And it's about traveling through the train to change society. However, as these people move along, they start realizing more and more, especially at the climax, you and the main character here start realizing, maybe society is the way it is for a reason. If every piece in this train doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to, the whole thing falls apart. Parasite is a very similar movie in that rather than going from left to right, it literally goes up and down. Down and up. There's a lot of just clear visuals with the stairs of going higher and lower in society that really shows the gap in between socioeconomic classes. And it's really interesting, right? They live in, the main family parasitically attaches itself to a rich family and starts to ingratiate themselves into that level of society. Don't worry, I won't spoil anything. But they live in a half basement home to show how underground they really are. and how really it's society's pressures that put them in that situation. And there's no actual difference between the people at the bottom and the people at the top. And it discusses other themes of elitism between these classes. It's a very interesting, well-made, and just beautiful movie. There's a lot of like video analyses, not just on how accurate the symbolism and imagery is, but how clear the cinematography is. So certain scenes will line up with each other on like a frame by frame basis. It's sort of hard to explain. I definitely recommend looking up some videos to describe it. Parasite can be found on Hulu now, and Snowpiercer can be found on Netflix. Another, what's the image? Oh, well, I don't have the movie up. There's some other movies by Bong Joon-ho that are also on Netflix, such as Aksha. I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You can't go wrong. You just, and you get a good movie.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I personally haven't seen Parasite yet. I've only seen a short video from Wired on the application of the, with Korea, how there's the sub basement or like, the apartments between the basement and between the first floor. And that was really interesting. But I have myself seen Snowpiercer, and I can say that it's one of my favorite movies. The actors do an amazing job at portraying this dystopian reality that we live in. And it really makes you doubt your own like economic and, just like societal situation at the end, because though you might not be doing too well, you're always a cog in a machine. And if all cogs work perfectly, then the machine will work perfectly. And, with Snowpiercer, it's really interesting to apply to all societies, not necessarily just the, we're all going to die. It's the apocalypse. We're all on a train. Choo choo. It's cold.
I'm sorry.
But like it's genuinely an interesting movie. And choo choo.
Sugar.
Though I do have to say there's some really like painful plot holes.
Yeah.
That like
the movie's good, but there are some times where it's like, all right. Parasite completely blows this movie out of the water. I know there are some people that feel differently, but Parasite is a far better movie. Also, fun fact, both of these movies are getting HBO series.
Ooh.
We have one visual from the Snowpiercer one. It looks terrible, but, surprised. It looks very different. It's taking place on a different train. I believe it's taking place on the Icebreaker.
Interesting.
Parasite is doing this one thing that's actually kind of, which I'm questioning, is that they're bringing in American actors for the HBO series.
Yeah.
Bong Joon-ho doesn't know if it's going to be like, he's still debating whether or not it's going to be a completely different story or just like a lot of scenes from the movie just expanded upon. But like actors, I want to say Mark Ruffalo is confirmed for being in it next. And like, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting and really, I'm struggling for the words. I thought it was like culturally dynamic to have, I shouldn't say dynamic, but it's what society, it's what we kind of needed in an Oscar sense, like for film award sense, like to have just a full South Korean cast.
Yeah, like
that did a lot for the movie.
Let's be honest, the Oscars are usually just like old white guys getting awards.
And it's not even it's not even just old white guys. Now it's only old white guys that support movies and not Netflix.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's like we talked about in the previous episode, like very specific studios like A24 like doesn't get as many awards as Lionsgate or what's the other ones? I can't remember. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think the idea with the American actors could be cool if Bong Joon-ho would do like an approach with American society. Though he's a Korean director, maybe not have as much of a understanding of the issues that American society faces. But it would be really interesting if that kind of Parasite mindset and that Parasite lens was applied to American society, because you guys have a lot of problems, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, actually, this was something I wanted to bring up. What Snowpiercer does bring up is a really interesting, just because you reminded me of American society with Parasite. Snowpiercer brings up a lot of really interesting themes of totalitarianism, right? Where it's like everyone has a distinct role, and if everyone does it, then we're going to do well. This is very applicable to now. When you look at other countries like Greece or even Slovakia, because they went into utter shutdown and they're like, okay, you know what, you're staying home or we're taking out the military, they're able to get rid of the virus very, very quick. But in sacrifice of not wanting to compromise people's freedoms, but that's a whole different story about whether or not it's actually constitutional to stay at home, by allowing people to have that much choice, you perpetuate the disease, and it's running rampant. Spoiler movie, I need to spoiler one thing, one small thing about Snowpiercer. The train crashes at the end because people are given that choice, and that's sort of like how U.S. society right now is crashing because they have the choice to go outside.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you picked this this director and this movie for the topic of on the Socially Distant Podcast, because, like you said, in Slovakia we were very totalitarian in our handling of the current crisis, and currently we have less than I want to say less than 200, because this morning we had 207 cases.
I was talking to some family in Greece. Basically, based on what happened in big rips to Italy, Greece went into such an utter shutdown, they only had 100 deaths in total.
Yeah, currently we have only 27 and very low chance of having any more. So
yeah.
I mean, knock on wood, because the economy is pretty much completely reopened now, but hopefully it's going to be fine. But yeah, wonderful movies, Christos.
So once again, just to reiterate, you can find Snowpiercer and other Bong Joon-ho movies such as Okja on Netflix, while Parasite is streaming on Hulu right now.
Yeah, hopefully comes to Netflix soon.
Probably won't. I'm guessing that's probably Hulu's biggest moneymaker right now.
Would make sense.
Except for us, if we can get a Hulu
and sport. Live sports. Did you know Hulu has live sports?
It does? Oh wait, what sports are you gonna stream right now? Korean basketball. Oh no, actually, I want to say Korean baseball is flourishing right now. Fun fact.
Yeah, I can imagine. Being literally the only sport. Actually, no, German soccer reopened, and they have like cardboard cutouts coming to the stadiums. It's really funny. You can pay to get a cardboard cutout in the stadium.
It's terrible.
So should I introduce my movie next?
No, that is all the time we have for the Socially Distant. Yes.
Well, it was great knowing you. All right, so the movie I will be talking about today, a segue, Germany, Europe, France. We'll be talking about a French movie made in 1995. It's called La Haine, or La Haine if you're American.
Lane.
It translates to the hatred. Hello, everyone. Back from that quick break we had. So the movie, it translates to, I'm not sure if I said this before, but it translates to the hatred. And so it's this movie, without spoiling it, it is about the life of teenagers like me and Christos, roughly 18 to early 20s, living in the French banlieue. So a little background on that. Unlike in America and Europe, the poor, what people would typically call ghettos, are located in the suburbs of a city. So this specific banlieue, or like a European ghetto, is located in the outskirts of Paris, and it's the three characters of the movie that we are presented is Vince, Said, and Hubert, or Hubert if you're American.
Who looks at a baby and names him Hubert?
But in French, it's Hubert. Wouldn't you want to name your kid Hubert?
No, because you'd get some dummy American cross the seas, walk in, look at your kid and name him, look at him and call him Hubert. And that's a shame. That's just following bloodline.
Yeah. Well, so the three characters, they're very significant in their background. With Vince, he's Jewish Eastern European. Saeed is a Muslim, and an Arab. They call him an Arab, and um, assuming he's Muslim. And Hubert is he's black. So this movie really its main topic, or the reason it was mostly made, was to show the police violence and police brutality in the French banlieues at the time, which was the 90s. But
and how is this applicable to U.S. society?
Well,
I'm kidding.
So I'll get to that at the end. It's
Okay.
it's very interesting the way it can be applied. But I wanted to talk about some of the themes first. So the first theme that really pops out to you is the theme of insignificance in this society, like similar as to what Christos said. We're all just like with Snowpiercer, we're all just cogs in a machine. It's in the grand scheme of things, we're insignificant. A machine can run without one cog pretty successfully. It's not like the whole thing will collapse if the entirety of society collapses if one person dies. And this is immaculately, absolutely incredibly shown in this movie, with it starting with putting it into scale. So it shows the entire Earth as its first scene, with the iconic "It's not the fall that matters, it's the landing" quote going over it. And this just puts it into perspective that we're just small beings. Like, this story that you're about to see is just a very small part of the entire world. And so now another scene that's amazing at doing this is when the characters are in Paris proper by the Eiffel Tower. Christos, want to pull up the first one I sent you, the first video?
Got you.
So when these characters are in Paris proper, it really puts, oh God, you good, bro? It puts the film into a perspective with this dolly zoom, or a vertigo shot that people would call it a vertigo shot. I don't know, it's properly called a dolly zoom. But of zooming out from the characters, or I'm not sure, is it from the characters or, yeah, this one. So it zooms out from the Paris like skyline, or the main street of Paris, onto the characters. Yeah,
That'd be a really insane shot today. And considering the year that movie came out, God, that's amazing.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So this was all shot on film in black and white, right? So I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to get this shot, and how many like cartridges of 8mm, or how many millimeter film this was shot on were needed to get it. This shot is one of my favorite shots in all of cinema. It's absolutely amazing. And it really represents the idea of insignificance as well, because you see the entirety of Paris, and it zooms into our characters, just, minding their business. And the sound also fades away a bit. I'm not sure if you can notice it on the phone, because it's a bit less like subtle, but it's really interesting because it just puts it into perspective. Like, you have the entirety of Paris, and you have this very small story happening in the background. This kind of shows that so the whole movie revolves around one character finding a gun from a policeman. And in Europe, unlike in America, having a gun is a big deal. There's not that many guns in all of Europe. So having this gun was a very effective, tool against the police and the minds of the young teens. But the movie kind of, the main character's efforts with the gun are completely futile, and whatever he does with the gun is at the end useless. So it kind of shows that we can revolt however much we want, and whether it's against the police or government, there's not really like a chance of changing society. The film is like a whole loop where it starts off the same way that it ends, and no change is done, even though the character has the gun and has this power. This theme of insignificance can also be seen in the second scene I sent you, which is the scene with it's also another infamous scene from the movie. It's called the DJ scene,
Sorry,
where
the what scene?
the DJ scene.
Oh, DJ. Okay.
Yeah, DJ, disc jockey.
Full screening. What? Sorry. I'll edit this. I don't know why it's not full screening. There we go.
Oh, there we go. So why I think it's really cool because again it shows the scale of things. And another element to that. We might not show the whole thing.
Did you keep showing it, or is that good?
Yeah, maybe skip like 10 seconds ahead. Yeah, and play here for like 20 seconds. This one's really cool.
1, 2, 3, come on!
Yeah, so you can end it here. That's pretty much. So this scene does a really good job at doing three things. So first, showing the French banlieue. So this is the situation that's happening everywhere pretty much around Europe with the poorer regions of a city, is that's how it looks like. And there's a lot of stories and a lot of people congregating in, this area. So tying onto that is the theme of insignificance, this DJ playing his tunes to the entire square or the entire group of buildings, and it's slowly zooming out onto the entire banlieue. So at the end of the shot, though we didn't show it, the music completely changes to the classic music from the sound of the sound of the police, like the hip hop track. It changes to this classical music, and the drone flies over the buildings.
How do you even do that with a drone in when was this movie come out?
1995.
They had to strap that onto a helicopter.
Yeah, and the not even, because they got it from close to the window up to over the Paris skyline. So
crazy,
insanely made movie. And this also really ties well onto, so as a European, and as a European going to an American school, I very well know the impact of American culture on European society, or society everywhere else. And this scene shows it also really well. You have a DJ playing an American song and sampling it, and it's this being a local community, a small story, and then zooming out onto a French song. The impact that American culture has on a small community can be insane, especially in poorer areas. And the society of those, or the culture of those areas can solely be based off American culture. And there's a point in the movie where Vince is giving Saeed a haircut, and he messes up. He cuts it too short, and Saeed is very mad, but Vince starts to justify it, said, "Oh, that's how they wear it in New York. That's the cool way now." And it really shows that, how society can be influenced by other cultures. And this is very prominent in Europe by American, influenced by American, more specifically New York society. And okay, I have a little list here. So I'm just trying to go through it a bit. But yeah, this movie being made in the 90s also accentuated that. And here's my final point. Though it talks mostly about poverty, gun violence, and police violence in Europe, and more specifically France, it can be applied to virtually anywhere. The theme of insignificance, like you said with Parasite, we're all just cogs in a machine. It's all just one system. We're insignificant. What's the point anyways? That kind of nihilistic approach to it that whatever you do, the main character with the gun couldn't do anything. So you can't do anything either. He had this power, this exceptional symbol of power that is a gun in European society, at least. And he couldn't change anything, even with that. So, it applied to society. You can't change it. And that's kind of the idea of the whole movie, at least the way I interpret it. But that movie, I really recommend everyone watches. It's really well made and
talks about. Is it on any streaming services?
So it's on Amazon Prime, but this is like this is secret information.
Hold on.
Yeah. Check if the FBI is coming. Okay, lock the door. Turn the blinds down. The whole movie is uploaded on Vimeo with subtitles. Yeah, and it's in French, of course.
I don't speak surrender.
I don't speak white flag. Wait a minute. That could be interpreted wrong. I don't mean it that way. But yeah, it's very interesting. We're all insignificant. What's the point?
Unless you're me. Okay, now let's continue.
All right. So, want me to introduce the prompt? Or?
Actually, let me do it because I changed it a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Now we're getting into the danger zone, where we bring up a prompt and we discuss it. Today's prompt is, what aspect of society would you highlight and how? And by this, let me explain what I mean by this. So when you look at Snowpiercer or Parasite, they're trying to highlight the disparities between socioeconomic classes. Parasite does it by showing a very clear vertical visualization of people at the bottom and people at the top. Snowpiercer does it from the people on the left to the people on the right. Joker does it with the clown. So I'm saying, well,
mentally deranged.
If you were to direct a movie, what aspect of society would you highlight, and what symbol would you use to highlight it?
Well, Christos, what aspect of society would you highlight, and what symbol would you use to highlight?
So, at least I'm sharing this.
Like the idea was like with La'ane, like you had the gun. It's a symbol of power, like not
symbol
being.
For gun. The gun is symbol for gun. Whoa.
What?
So, I think what I'd have to do. So I'm first off, I cool symbols that I've always found is using like classical and antiquatal like allegories or metaphors. So like when you look at Dante's Inferno and he brings up like the idea of hell, and he talks about and he brings in like classical figures from Greek mythology too. Really, he's just ranting about people he doesn't like in his society and talking about how he was really mad for being ran out of, I want to say, was it Florence or Venice?
Florence. Yeah,
for getting kicked out of Florence. It really is just one large hate mail, but he's hiding it under the guise of an inferno. So I'd love to try to do something with that. I think you could do a lot with like a David, biblical now, David and Goliath type situation, and talk about the impact of voices in our society. Because sometimes, I don't know, I want to make it a double standard too, because it's a lot of people talking over each other right now. How do I explain this? So, okay. For one thing, I think you do something really cool with coronavirus as like a reimagining of like some black plague in history and try to reflect ourselves onto it. This is just a thing that you can see a lot in movies where it's the more disconnected from something you are, like the less realistic it is, the more truthful it becomes, because it allows you to magnify certain aspects of it and reveal bigger ideals. So like, obviously, there's not that many stairs in Parasite, but in real life compared to Parasite, and there's no actual train going across a frostbitten world.
Well, I mean,
but
I hope not.
But because it's so disconnected, you're clearly able to see the visual visual symbolism behind it. So I want to make something very disconnected from our society to just talk about it. And actually, no, here's what I do. I do definitely something cyberpunk, like with Akira. I want to set something so far into the future that it's so postmodern that it's always applicable to our times.
Like
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic Greco-Roman ideals.
Yeah. A book that isn't sci-fi but does this really well is Heart of Darkness. The book takes place in the Congo, but it discusses every theme from empires. It just discusses a lot of themes, like racism, socioeconomic classes again. And it has a lot of really interesting symbols, such as like there's this black person in the Congo that's very mistreated. And what he does is he takes a white band and wraps it around his neck. And there's just, I won't get into it now. It's a very like interesting symbols throughout the book. And it was actually adapted into a movie called Apocalypse Now. See, the whole point of the book, and it says this in the very beginning, is that the book straight up says, don't look at the specifics in the Congo, because this can be applied to anywhere, which is why it was able to be applied to the Vietnam War with Apocalypse Now. It's been done a ton of times over with a ton of different societies. So again, let me reiterate. If I were to direct a movie, I want to do it on a macro level of society just to get a good feel of everything.
Macro being small or big?
Macro means big.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. I wanted to be so disconnected from society, whether or not I use aspects from the future or from the far past, so that I could get a good understanding of it. There are some things I'd like to highlight, and it's the idea that this is something that Nietzsche brings up in his constant criticism of other philosophers, and that a lot of people will, including philosophers, everyone will do this, where they actually people will say, oh, I thought through the facts and this is my outcome. When really people start with an outcome and cherry-picked facts so that they can get their outcome. You see a lot of people doing that to ignore stay-at-home mornings now, where they're like, me and my friend have stayed in quarantine for the past 3 months, so it'll be fine if we hang out very close to each other because we've both been under quarantine. The government has lied in the past, so how do we know they're not lying about this? I'm sad, masks suck, so I'm just going to take it off.
Yeah.
My personal well-being is worth more than your physical well-being. So it's all about choosing facts that justify your own position.
Yeah, it's really interesting you talk about philosophers, right? There's philosophy is like a regurgitation of itself. Like you have the idea of Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates.
Creed Johnson, actually.
Oh, okay. They're all like, they take the ideas of the person that they liked before them and, elaborate on it, or take a very specific part and elaborate on it. And, with, you have that with Machiavelli too, ends justify the means kind of deal, where you pick something and then you do whatever it takes to justify it.
But here's the funny thing, right? Like, him writing that book is another example of that, because he only wrote it so he'd get released from prison.
Nope.
The layers of just like, I'm better than you, just stacks on.
You can't even see the top anymore. But okay, so what I was going to say is that it can also be taken in a good way, where like in Slovakia and Greece, our success of fighting the coronavirus was in strict lockdown and stuff like that. So though it might not have been, freedom, give me back my prom 2020.
Yeah, that's so stupid. That is so stupid. But there is some, like, I could sort of understand why people would act this way, but they're totally doing it wrong. They're trying to justify a need for American freedom, not a need for American freedom. They're trying to make up for a lack of discipline with a need for American freedom. Because, like, the reason I bring this up is because when you look at, like, in American history, a very clear example is with World War II, where the U.S. had actually set up their own Japanese internment camps where they would house in their own sort of, not nearly as bad as European, or I should say German concentration camps. But they would rip Japanese citizens out of their homes and throw them into these camps until the war was over. When you really didn't need to. It was really just a reflex of Asian racism that had been boiling in the U.S. ever since the gold rush. It pushed things, but yeah, people are trying to mask their lack of discipline with an idea of American freedom, where you really need to understand what times is it does ends justify the means, and what times is it, okay, we need to be actually smart about this.
Yeah. Well, that was a wonderful political offshoot rant we had over there.
Well, is that not what a movie is? Ace Ventura 2 does a great job of discussing animal treatment on a global scale, I'll have you know.
Terminate. So the prompt exactly was, what aspect of society and how would you portray it? Yeah. So what I think is a very important thing to deal with right now, or to think to.
Well, thank you all for listening to the podcast. That is all.
I swear to God, Christos. I swear to God. Wait. You're on that side, right? No, on that side. Oh. But what I talk about is the disparity. There's the word gap is used in many ways nowadays, and with society, and gender ideas and stuff like that. But I think there's a very important gap that goes very unnoticed, and that is the information gap that is between higher economically more well-doing families with very educated children and less educated, less poorer families with less educated children. And there's a massive increase, and it's increasing daily, with smarter kids or rich kids getting smarter and poor kids getting dumber over generations. And I think
you can connect that to the technological gap in between. That's a big cause for it. Right? Like the online teaching in a lot of areas just couldn't happen because kids don't have access to a computer.
Yeah. So even if we compare it on schools between, in our local area.
On PDS.
Yeah. Not PDS, PHS.
PHS.
I know how one of my friends goes to PHS, or some of my friends go to PHS, and they told me is that you literally had to check in every day by putting your email into a Google survey and then doing your homework. Like Zoom calls were not really a thing, right? And so it shows that like a public school like Princeton High School wasn't able to properly educate its children during this time because of technological despairs and information despairs. And I think that's a really important way of highlighting it, especially with the information technology that we're facing right now with artificial intelligence. I love that term. It's amazing. And it means a lot for technology. It means a complete change in our lifestyles, and hopefully something that will improve or make this information gap smaller. Segue, I would make a film about AI, somewhat in the sense of like Chappie, like I talked about last time, or iRobot. I'm pretty sure that's the movie with Will Smith. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could probably do something really cool where you can highlight like the information and technological gap between socioeconomic classes by having two very different robots. One that's like the robot from Real Steel that was pulled out of the garbage, and the other one being like the Terminator.
Yeah.
Like, you can highlight like, here's the difference in between these two people, and like you could say, oh, they had the same beginning, coming from like the same amount of resources. I shouldn't say resources, but like you could do something really cool about how the playing field started off being different for the two robots, which is why they're so different.
Yeah. And though that's I think that's a really cool interpretation, but it kind of shows that there's a possibility, right? Like, whereas in reality very small percentage of kids in less wealthy areas actually get to achieve the same level of success or education that wealthier kids get.
Yeah.
So I think
two very wealthy kids.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to look at like two very extreme situations: a super rich, super smart kid and like not as smart, poor. I don't want to say super dumb. That sounds really bad. But like a less wealthy kid with less educational opportunities kind of clashed in this environment where they have to work together, and it would like illustrate how, oh, we suck at educating kids that aren't wealthy. So like showing that due to this work in this closed environment where the rich kid has to like deal with, that's again a terrible thing to say, but it kind of highlights that we need to do a better job at educating everyone, not just the super wealthy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at how many kids we know that are just idiots and squandering just an amazing opportunity for an education that other people just simply cannot have access to.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I what was it? My dad was on a call with some people from certain universities, not mostly European, not American, but there was a statistic that he said that it's not worth it to take away the phones of wealthy kids because they are more likely to search up information on the phones rather than use it to absorb content than less wealthy kids are. And that really struck me because it like shows that even this device that people do have access to, in both like socioeconomic environments, it can be used very differently by more educated people than can be by less educated people. I think that's really like a sad, in a sense, statistic, not because of the kids themselves, but because of the system failing. Let's just say that.
Society or phone system?
What do you mean?
Well, you said system, right? Like we're talking about machinery and like a
no. Okay. No, it's not your Apple device crashing, Christos. I mean the downfall of education in modern society. Okay,
it kind of goes hand in hand. I think about I was speaking to a close family friend who I don't know, but he prays a lot throughout the day and he fasts, and I've always wondered why would he do that, and he was like, oh, it's to remind myself of discipline. And me and him would have conversations about it, and I think a lot of that has a good connection to the way technology is used by people. So a lot of people don't have the discipline listen. You have the whole wealth of human knowledge right here in the palm of your hand, and yet people
power in this thing. Then
why not send to Pluto?
Yeah. Then no. Then all of the machines that sent a man to the moon.
Yeah.
Like,
right. But
it's crazy.
People lack the discipline to be able to try to learn themselves some information, to teach themselves what they're interested in. So I'm finding what you just said to be really interesting, and I agree. It would be a good idea to have some reform in society that focuses on, I don't want to say moral education, because that's how you get nationalism.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd like to say equal opportunity education. Mm-hmm. Though, like, you're obviously an American and you value capitalism a lot. The idea of having the ability to go to a private school to get an insanely good education, but having that standard of even public education being decent, but being able to get more from a private education. Does that make sense?
Are you trying to say like they need to raise the standard of public education?
Yeah. More so than lower their standards.
It's terrible with this virus. The thing that everyone's cutting is the education spending. My aunt is a principal at a school, and she's like, "Yeah, this is a rough time to be at a school."
Yeah, I can't imagine what people like this must be going through, especially if there was this funny meme on Instagram that I saw. Like, this is in Slovakia, this is the student's dream. Pubs are open, but schools are closed. So it's terrible, but actually they're opening on June 1st. So Monday, kids will be going to school again. But yeah, I can't imagine what it must be like, and it's really difficult with the way education is set up now. It's not compatible with the current situation in every aspect. So I think it's very important to highlight, and there's not many movies talking about it. There's like Good Will Hunting that does a good job of doing that. And again, a movie I highly recommend. But besides that, could you name any, like yourself?
There's a lot of movies where this can be inferred from, but doesn't address it directly.
Maybe Social Network or Life of Pi? I don't know.
Because, like, I mean, it goes hand in hand with just the cash flow being having a big disparity in between it.
Yeah. I like how this turned from a talking about movies to a full.
Well, that's the point of movies. That's the point of movies. When a director makes a movie, he doesn't come up with the movie and then tries to stick themes into it. He comes up with the theme. I shouldn't say he. He or she.
Michael Bay.
He or she comes up with the themes and then writes a movie around it.
You should just say them, Christos. That's not very.
Literally, like, go die in a hole, and I'll burn you, and I will take a photo. I will hold a ladder in my hand knowing I could help you, but choose not to. I knew I could be there in your time of need, and yet I turned you down, and you were worse for the experience. And that's what gives me pleasure.
Oh. And you'll burn the ladder as well, just to make sure there's no possible way of me getting it.
No. In fact, I'll go save another person with the ladder.
As a matter of fact, I will dig another hole for another person that I will save.
Exactly.
Yeah, dude, society, it's crazy. It's wild.
We do live.
Dude. Oh, also, I didn't explain this at the start. I split my finger open this, like, a couple hours ago, so that's what this is for. I had, like, a little...
How many thumbs up would you give this podcast?
I swear to God, Christos. 2 thumbs? Which, last time on this hand, I also had, like, a bandage. That's because I fell and I did something with my wrist and it really hurt. It still hurts, but now there's also this.
It's all about the flick of the wrist.
I swear to God. It's iced out, right? It's iced out.
Well, Dominik, would you like to take us out? I believe we've discussed everything there has ever been to discuss, and society will now end.
Yeah, I think this was our last episode of the Untitled Socially Distant Podcast. Thank you, everyone.
Actually, I have the name wrong there on the YouTube. It's Socially Distant Untitled Podcast.
Oh God, Christos. It's all because of society.
Society makes us forget our core values.
That's deep, man. That's deep. Well, anyways, thank you everyone for watching. Tune in next time when we'll discuss something that we pick sometime.
Next week prompt is...